everyone, and welcome to the SSPI podcast. I'm Tamara Bond-Williams, Executive Director of SSPI. Today we start a new series, Accelerate Change. Sponsored by SES, Accelerate Change is a podcast series that explores how creative collaboration is transforming the pace of innovation across the space and satellite industry. SES is championing a new era, one where partnerships, agile technologies, and bold ideas are breaking old cycles and building a more connected future. Through conversations with leaders in cloud, telecommunications, sustainability, and space infrastructure, we dive into the stories shaping the next frontier of global connectivity. What if your phone could connect to space? Not with a bulky terminal, but with the device already in your hand, wherever you are, no matter the infrastructure on the ground. In this first episode of the series, titled Signal Anywhere, Direct-to-Device Connectivity with Lynk Global, we explore how unmodified mobile phones can connect directly to satellites. No towers needed, no special hardware. Our guest is Amy Mehlman, Executive Vice President and Chief Global Affairs Officer at Lynk Global. Amy has shaped telecom and space policy for nearly 30 years, from Congress to the FCC, from multinational companies to NewSpace startups. Today, she's helping guide a company that's redefining who can connect and how through a new model of global access. Amy, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to talk about this and have a nice little dialogue here.
Fantastic. I'm super excited to have you. This is a super hot topic. So thank you again for being here. Let me just start with the big idea, right? So what is the problem that Lynk is solving? And how does this idea of direct-to-device connectivity change the equation for global access?
Sure. No, I appreciate the question, as it is a question that is asked a lot. I mean, because we do have actually a fairly extensive cellular network, at least in the United States, and many, first world countries who are, have this proliferation of terrestrial services. We all have been on that road trip, right? Where all of a sudden, still, our cell phone cuts out. And we're trying to figure out, how are we going to connect? The ideal situation is you have multiple systems that are connecting, whether that's terrestrial, as it has been traditionally, that connect to each other, and you're roaming on somebody else's networks. We have an extensive mesh network that does that, but there's still gaps. And sometimes those gaps, become critical issues, right? Maybe you're in an area where you get an accident and you need to connect to emergency services. Maybe you're just out and you need to connect to your family, various different situations. But, we thought, hey, there has to be a way to connect to a satellite. There has to be a way to, prove that we can give a seamless service to an end user. And how can we do that inexpensively, right? So essentially, we created a system that is, at its simplest, a cell tower in the sky. How are we able to create a situation where we sort of fool the customer to think that they're going to yet just another terrestrial tower? And that's essentially what we're doing. It is something that has been tested on 7 continents with our service and MNO partners. And we're really excited about the uptake. As you've seen, there's a number of folks that have been interested in this, but Lynk is really just trying to solve not only the connectivity problem more generally, but doing it at a cost that is not so high, but it will, give the user what they need to be able to connect and really have it just be a rounding factor to them on the cost side.
Yeah. Um, I love that expression, cell tower in the sky, because right, we don't have to think about cell towers, right? You drive to the next place and you know that some cell tower somewhere will pick you up. And is that the vision of how it works, that you go and you just pick up something, or do you have to like hit a button to say I want to pick up this
No
other thing?
button, no button.
No.
That was a critical piece of this. I mean, the idea is truly just to be that next cell tower. So in your current phone, most phones out there have essentially what amounts to be a daisy chain of service providers, essentially, that you'd go with, depending on who your contract is with, et cetera. So we would just be that next one in line. Again, essentially just another cell tower. So make it truly simple, make it usable on your current cell phone. And in particular, I do want to focus on that current cell phone. It's not actually only cell phones, it's anything that has a cellular chip, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've done tests where, we've sort of been looking for various things on the ground to see, how we can connect them. And, we've run into things like CPAP machines, like these 2G, um, systems that need connectivity, but just are older systems. Why is that
Wow.
important? Well, not everybody has the newest iPhone with 5G on it, right? If you look at rest of world, there's a lot of legacy devices out there that need to be connected. In fact, probably the majority of devices are not 5G devices yet. So we really want to, allow this leapfrogging of connectivity for some of those players out there that can't afford a new phone or a new IoT device or device that is connecting, whether it's an automobile, for example, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Lots of those out there that are still working on 2G type connectivity. So it really was important to us to figure out how we got to those devices in a meaningful way, didn't leave them behind and create this, additional digital gap, right? So that was truly, an important goal of ours at the outset.
Yeah, I will tell you, you were talking about people not having the latest iPhone, and what the thought triggered for me is my mom, right? And
Yeah.
it's not that she doesn't have the latest thing, it's that she doesn't want it. She's like, my track phone works just fine. And I bang my head against a wall every time she says this to me. And so it's encouraging to see that a company is thinking through how to get to those older devices, because the services aren't less necessary, but there are entire populations that don't have them, like you said.
Exactly. Or to your point, might not want them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so you're doing this thing. You're targeting unmodified phones and older devices, or any device really that will connect to cell towers generally. Um, what have been the biggest policy and regulatory hurdles that you faced in making this vision possible?
Well, I think it's just the concept was foreign, right? So the idea that, oh, well, you can just be another roaming partner, does that is
Hmm.
how does that fit in our regulatory processes?
Yeah.
I'd say, at the outset, there was an adoption by lots of countries that we've been working with to at least test this idea, give an experimental license and test the idea as to, whether it would work. And then as we sort of go forward, some have employed situations where, essentially there's a non-objection to us just being another cell tower because that's how, we communicate with the end user through our M&O partnership. So it's not really any different as far as the interference scenarios, et cetera. It's very, again, very similar to a terrestrial network.
Hmm.
Um, and then there are other situations where like the FCC or the UK, and others have been looking at the licensing of these types of services more broadly and trying to get some structure around it. So, and that's fine. That is not a problem at all. It adds a little bit of time. Technology wants to, get out there quickly. Sometimes the regulatory processes can be somewhat inhibiting when it comes to getting that technology out quickly. But we want to make sure that it's done and done fairly and equitably. And certainly we want to make sure that the environment for our end users is the best that it can be. So I understand that some are looking at this more broadly.
Yeah. I'm sure I'm dating myself, but I'm also sure that you remember this spectrum issues of, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, where, this was a big competitive issue, right? There was a large competitive threat because cellular services, cable services wanted spectrum that satellite was used to having. Um, and and so that was a big industry scare. And the industry, of course, has adapted in many ways, especially technologically. Is the Link solution a technological adaptation that allows you to play in the same space as cellular space?
So yes, that's exactly what it is, of sorts. So again, think of it as it is a roaming partner. We are a roaming partner. So when you do not have service, and by the way, that could be a gap in coverage, or that could be a situation where the terrestrial network is down, right? In a natural disaster, whatever that may be, or just a power outage, et cetera. So we utilize the MNO frequencies, mobile network operator frequencies, and we essentially emit when they cannot, right? So it really does provide a nice sharing scenario. Additionally, I would say that there are other frequencies that are allocated for mobile satellite services, and those are some other frequencies that are being looked at to be complementary to the services that we're offering through the MNO frequencies as well. So, as we are looking to have more capacity, capability, and throughput for purposes of the end user having a seamless service, there is a requirement to have a decent amount of spectrum to be able to do that. So, there'll be a blend of those sets of frequencies utilizing, that sort of mesh of the two to provide service to the end user. And by the way, Tamara, I remember Pioneer's preferences licenses, and so that's really dating me. So nobody knew what the heck was going on at that time with cellular, except maybe Marconi or something. But yeah, time flies, and I would say there is a thirst for spectrum in many different industries at this point. What I like to see is the real camaraderie, frankly, between the two industries, the terrestrial industry and the satellite industry, because at the end of the day, my sense, and this is just what I have heard from some of the mobile network operators that I've been working with and talking to over the recent past, is quality of service is key. You don't want churn. You want to make sure that your user is happy. So how do you do that? You make sure that you don't have gaps in coverage. You make sure that it's seamless. The user doesn't know one way or another what they're using. They just are happy that they are connecting. And that's the goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think if to your point, if I think there's any bigger change right now in the market, in the marketplace, it's that idea that we are no longer in a competitive environment versus cellular versus satellite. It's those two markets are converging somewhat, and And it just opens up such a new realm of opportunity. And it's, now that we're here, now that the technology has made it possible, it feels like, gosh, wasn't this always a no-brainer? But of course it
Would have thought.
wasn't. Right. So, but here we are, and so I think a little bit about this idea of the change, right? And, that a lot of the regulations, a lot of the FCC rulings and so forth have been with the fact in mind, as it were, that these technologies were very different. They had different needs, and they were somewhat competitive with one another. And now we're coming into a space where the technology has transformed the market. These are now complementary technologies, or can be complementary technologies, and that there is an existing benefit to encouraging the cooperation. Um, is the regulatory environment lagging, and how do we close the gap between where we are today with the regulatory policies and structures? And also, I mean, you're a global company, so are you seeing those lags different in different places? Are there places where people are right on top of it and moving forward, and countries where it's actually harder? What's been like out there for you?
Yeah, so I say a little bit of everything, right? As you mentioned, we are a global company, and there have been some places where the regulatory bodies are very much understanding that this is just an extension of the MNO's service at this point, and have just allowed for us to contractually, essentially, if you can think about it this way, sublease the spectrum, right? We're just, again, another roaming partner. As this becomes a little bit more competitive of an industry, I think there are other agencies like the FCC, like Ofcom, et cetera. I think Canada has also looked at this. So they are looking at, what are the rules around it? How many D2D providers should be in a particular market? How's this all going to work? Is there other spectrum that we should be factoring in to this type of service? So, again, I think it's a little different, in various places. And I would also argue there are places that need it more quickly.
Yeah.
And so I think some of those places are much more amenable to getting the service up and operating faster, potentially, and are willing to sort of go with a non-objection approach. And that's been very helpful, certainly helpful in our work with the mobile network operators and our ability to test with them and get our beta service out there.
You are listening to The Better Satellite World, the longest running continuous podcast in the commercial space and satellite industry. The Better Satellite World podcast is funded by the corporate partners of SSPI, Hughes, Access Intelligence, and the American Space Exploration Fund. This podcast is also supported by live event partner Hogan Lovells. Have you heard about SBQ? Space Business Qualified is a popular online learning program for industry professionals designed by JSOA, SSPI, and SatProf. To learn more, visit spacebq.org. And in August and November, join Tamara, Space News Magazine, and the New York Space Alliance for the next New York Space Business Roundtable. If you want to get inside the industry's biggest issues and investments, meet startups and high-profile industry leaders from around the world, the Roundtable is the real New York event you cannot miss. If you like this podcast and are hearing it for the first time, a new podcast drops every Monday. To listen to previously released episodes, visit sspi.org/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. And now back to the Better Satellite World.
I was just thinking that, as a technology that's, emerging, it it seems like it would make sense to take advantage of the places where the regulatory environment is highly favorable to prove the test case for those more challenging regulatory environments.
Right.
Yeah. Well, how about when we think about the idea of partnerships, right? As you said, there are some places where it's really critical. I imagine that there are countries where it's hard, right? I think about places, for instance, like in Haiti, which seems to get slammed with a hurricane every other
Yeah.
week or something. So, it's hard to put actual physical infrastructure in Haiti because the environment is unstable. And so I imagine that there's lots of places similar to that that are, very open to saying, yeah, if we can have the convenience of cell service without having to have ground infrastructure that's going to get destroyed next week, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
We're happy to organize to work with you, right? But what do they need to do in order to be an effective partner? And is it what you just said? Like, okay, as long as there's no objection, what kinds of things are you looking for to successfully create collaboration? Is it only governments, or do some of the telcos collaborate with you as well?
Yeah. So, first of all, non-objection is the absolute best and best way to do things from my perspective. Although with the mobile satellite service frequencies, those will require some licensing. But honestly, you hit the nail on the head. Again, there are some places where it is just hard to keep that infrastructure in place. But even so, even if they do invest in that infrastructure on the terrestrial side, there may be times where it just simply loses power, it goes down. And so you want to have those redundancies in place anyway, right? So, from a business perspective, we've been really happy with the mobile network operators that we've been working with, who see this as a value for, all of these reasons. Some places, as we've seen even in the United States, it is sometimes just very difficult to put those cell towers up in every little spot that you want to get to. And it just makes maybe more strategic and economic sense to utilize us. Maybe not. I'm not going to talk for the network operators here in the United States necessarily, but you can imagine in many other places around the world, if essentially you can get a comparable service from satellite that is not going to go down because there's a hurricane or a fire or whatever it is, on the ground, then all the better, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it's not going to cost me a lot of money. So that, in and of itself, it has been a driver, I think, for a lot of countries that we've been talking to, people out, fishing or rescue, missions at sea, or even, firefighters, as I mentioned, fire. So there's a lot of benefit that we've seen for some of these smaller. When I say smaller, I mean countries that have not, laid out this infrastructure on the ground as extensively, that have found, this as a driver for them.
Yeah, I was just, you mentioned fires and that, and hurricanes, and we were having that conversation, and it just clicked. I'm curious about what is the technology. And I realize that you're mainly on the policy side, so I don't want to, ask you a question that you can't answer. But I am curious because, I think that satellites have been more successful of late in overcoming things like, weather-induced interruptions. But that is still a thing, right? Simple stuff, right? I drive around in my car with Sirius XM, and all of a sudden I'm in a cloud of trees, and all of a sudden I'm hearing every third bar of the song, right? So is that how do you overcome that, or is it just you don't have to because you're connecting your as part of an ecosystem that's cell tower and satellite.
Yeah. So okay, there's a lot to unpack there. But basically, it depends on the frequencies and it depends what you're trying to do. So if you're looking at your XM Sirius radio, they actually have a mesh network of sorts. They actually have satellites, and then they have terrestrial base stations, which are repeaters. So they actually have a terrestrial network as well. So it's not ultimately too dissimilar. I mean, what we will have, or I'd say any satellite company would have a little bit more trouble as they go up in frequency. So the Ka band, you go up to like 27, 28 gigahertz, that has a little bit more trouble getting down to the ground if you don't have clear line of sight. As you go down in the spectrum, kind of like our radios, our old radios. Does anybody listen to radios? Hopefully they do. Those frequencies, 97.1. Okay, well, I'm going to hear that from, the District of Columbia, in the United States to, Baltimore, which is an hour away. So I'm going to be able to get through things. I'm going to be able to get that propagation. When you go up a little bit further, it's a little bit difficult. So we are working with the MNOs to figure out what works best where. Some of the frequencies that they use are lower in the spectrum, and some are a little bit further up, but offer a little bit more capability. So it'll probably be a blend of those various frequencies to get you to what you need, which is that seamless service. From a roaming perspective.
Yeah, I'm laughing because you mentioned specifically radio. This is an ongoing argument between me and my husband. I live upstate New York, but we both of us grew up in the city, and so the closer we get in a car to New York City, we start arguing over the radio stations, which radio stations we listen to.
I get it. I miss
we
it
both
at
have
times.
memories.
Like, does anybody have albums anymore? I can play
it. So, okay. Well, let me bring this home a little bit. So, you're providing a really amazing service. We're talking about the better satellite world here at SSPI, just the ways in which that satellite makes the world better. And obviously this service that you provide and the expanded ability of companies like yours to seamlessly integrate with devices that we all use is just part of an ongoing trend, right? But the flip side of that, of course, is that we are relying on a resource to provide these services, and that resource is space itself. And so I wonder, how does a company like Lynk Global think about that resource and how we keep that resource safe and available for use? What are you guys thinking about that, and how are you applying yourself to that concern?
Sure. Well, this is an absolutely, it's critical. It's a critical issue that we are all trying to ensure doesn't get us into trouble going forward. There are a lot of players in space. This has never been a more exciting time. You think back to, when stepping foot on the moon and where we are today, it's incredible what people are doing in space today. And that's not only what we're providing, but, space travel, space, transporting goods, across the world in record time. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in space. We need to preserve it. So I would say there's a lot going on. The COPUOS, the UN organization dealing with the peaceful use of outer space, is doing a wonderful job under the leadership of Arti Hala in ensuring that there's collaboration between users, collaboration between countries, making sure that countries are signing up to this peaceful use of outer space, and that they are actually putting in place, whether it's rules or just guidelines that we as operators can live by to make sure that we are, whether it's we have mechanisms on our spacecraft to, be able to maneuver around debris that already exists, or other satellite operators, whatever the case may be, to make sure that we are not creating more debris in space, and that we are actively getting our junk, I say junk, our satellites, for example, that are no longer useful, that we're taking those out of space when we should, and making sure that it's, LEO, low Earth orbit, isn't a graveyard orbit either, right?
Yeah.
So we are keenly aware of this on every level. We will be working with the appropriate agencies as well as other operators to make sure that we have systems to deal with space traffic management, that we're coordinating with the government and their systems, and even launch, by the way, making sure that everything that we do and we put into our system itself is safe to launch, because that's important as well. So, I have 3 children. I'm hoping to leave not only the Earth but space a better place for them. And I hope that every other operator is doing the same thing, and that is a little bit of a hope, because there are some that might just decide, oh, okay, I'm going to do a whole bunch of tests in space and whatever may be. I hope that's not the case going forward, because we all need to be stewards of this precious resource. But we can only do what we can do.
Yeah, yeah. I asked the question just because it occurs to me that one of the things that we can do is always ask the question, right? Just
Yes.
making sure we're keeping the industry honest on this topic. It's a pretty important one, and that's just going back to the big idea that our sponsor SES has, which is that there's so much amazing stuff that our industry could be doing, and 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 we sometimes are not able to move as quickly with the changes that we know are coming because we haven't thought through who are the right partners. How is Lynk? I mean, it feels like what you do is almost entirely collaboration, but are there unique collaborations that you're thinking about in order to make adoption of this direct-to-device movement more speedy?
Well, so for our build out, SES in particular has become a precious partner to us. So I'll use them as an example. One of the ways that we can actually launch our service more quickly for certain verticals is really to create this multi-orbit solution, and that's what we actually are doing with their MEO and GEO platforms, is to create this mesh network such that we can do that much more quickly. It's really been a wonderful collaboration so far. I'm certainly looking forward to the future with them, but this really does get to the convergence of these multiple technologies. So it really is going to be GEO, MEO, LEO, terrestrial. And creating this entire mesh network to, provide that end user what they need. But, there are, as I say, we will major in the things that we're best in and best at doing, and partner with the folks that do the other thing, right? So it really is a collaborative effort. Again, I'm super psyched about what we're doing with SES and our M&O partners collectively. And I think it's really going to be, a benefit to end users at the end of the day.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. And Amy, I really want to thank you. You are a very cogent speaker on this topic. I hear the passion for the topic all in your voice. And so I'm really grateful that you came to share with us. Alas, we are at the end of the time we have together. So I'm gonna close out with this one thing, just giving you an opportunity. Is there one satellite policy issue that you wish more people understood?
Wow. That is a loaded question. A policy issue, I think, getting to what we were just talking about a second ago, on sustainability. I think getting the right collaboration to allow us to work together and maintain space as a platform for science, a platform for communication, a platform for security, for our very survival, to be honest, if you look at GPS and other things. So a lot rides on this. And I think if we can really come together on what the future of space itself as space to work within, we will be better. We will all be better off. And so I would leave you with collaboration is key to the future of space.
Very well said. And so thank you so much, Amy. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
That concludes today's episode. Signal Anywhere, direct-to-device connectivity with Lynk Global. We thank our guest, Amy Mehlman, for spending this time with us. This podcast is made possible by the support of SSPI's professional, student, and corporate members. And we are especially grateful for our corporate partners, Access Intelligence, the producers of Via Satellite Magazine, the law firm of Clyde & Company, Hughes, an EchoStar company, and the American Space Exploration Fund, formerly known as the Space Shuttle Children's Trust Fund. To learn more about SSPI, visit our website at www.sSPI.org and follow us on X at SSPI, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. Actually, we now have an Instagram account, so follow us there as well. New episodes of the SSPI podcast, including the Better Satellite World podcast, the Satellite Futures podcast, and She Reaches Women in Space, are released every Monday. Subscribe to get podcasts at sSPI.org/podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and now also on YouTube. For Space and Satellite Professionals International, and for our producer, Ari Yates, I'm Tamara Bond Williams. Thank you and have a wonderful day.